For teenagers corner a 78-year-old Purple Heart veteran at a Phoenix gas station, dumping his coffee on his shirt and kicking his walker away while he struggles with his oxygen tank. The pack of bullies laugh as they scatter his dead wife's photographs across the oil-stained pavement, with their leader threatening to leave the old soldier stranded by stealing his car keys. But the quiet stranger in the leather jacket pumping gas at the next pump isn't just another customer. This is Steven Seagal himself. The teenage punks have no idea they just terrorized a war hero in front of a man who's spent decades perfecting the art of making bullies disappear. While the ringleader continues his assault, the aikido master approaches with that legendary calm that has terrified criminals for 30 years. The veteran's eyes widen in recognition as he realizes his savior, knowing these spoiled brats are about to learn why some legends never retire. The teens keep recording on their phones, thinking they're capturing another humiliation, but they're actually filming their own destruction. What happens when privileged punks pick on the wrong veteran at the wrong gas station? Will these bullies survive discovering why Steven Seagal's enemies always regret their choices? What happened next would terrorize these teenagers for the rest of their pathetic lives. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Arizona sun painted Sunset Memorial Cemetery in amber light as Harold Kowalski knelt beside his wife's headstone, his arthritic knees protesting against the marble. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days since Margaret had left him, yet he still counted every sunrise without her. "Had my checkup today, sweetheart," he whispered, adjusting the fresh lilies against her photograph. His weathered fingers traced her name etched in granite. "Dr. Morrison says my ticker's still strong. Stubborn as ever, just like you always said." A gentle breeze rustled the American flag beside her grave, and Harold's pale blue eyes misted. Margaret Rose Kowalski, beloved wife and mother. The stone didn't mention how she'd waited up nights during his tours in Korea, or how she'd held him when the nightmares came. How she'd raised their boy Michael while Harold was overseas, teaching him honor and courage that would later get him killed in Afghanistan. Harold struggled to his feet, his walker scraping against the concrete path. His Purple Heart license plate caught the dying light as he approached his 1995 Honda Accord, powder blue, just like Margaret's favorite dress. Every Tuesday, same routine. Visit Margaret, then Murphy's gas station on Camelback Road for fuel and a coffee that tasted like disappointment. The drive took 12 minutes through neighborhoods that no longer recognized him. Strip malls where corner stores used to be, kids with faces buried in phones instead of playing street hockey. Harold gripped the steering wheel tighter, his oxygen tank secure in the passenger seat like a metallic co-pilot. Murphy's gas station appeared ahead, its neon signs flickering against the desert twilight. Harold pulled up to pump number 3 with practiced precision, the same spot he'd used for 3 years. Routine provided structure when everything else felt like quicksand. That he gathered his essentials: worn leather wallet, plastic breathing mask, the walking stick that had become his reluctant companion. The credit card reader blinked expectantly. Harold fumbled with arthritic fingers, muscle memory from decades of handling weapons reduced to struggling with modern technology. Just another Tuesday evening ritual in a life measured by such small, necessary ceremonies. The black Camaro announced itself before Harold saw it, exhaust pipes roaring like an angry beast as it wheeled into the adjacent pump with deliberate aggression. Music pounded from speakers that probably cost more than Harold's monthly Social Security check. 4 teenagers spilled out like they owned the world. The leader, a blonde kid in designer clothes, surveyed the gas station with predatory confidence. His expensive watch caught the overhead lights as he spotted Harold's veteran license plate. "Check out Grandpa," Derek Brennan called to his crew, pointing at Harold's Purple Heart marker. "Bet the old soldier boy's got some more stories." Harold's hands trembled slightly as he inserted his credit card, the machine beeping with electronic impatience. These kids reminded him of the punks who'd started hanging around the neighborhood, all swagger and entitlement. He'd seen their type before: privileged, bored, looking for entertainment at others' expense. Tyler, Madison, and Cody flanked their leader like pack animals sensing weakness. Madison raised her phone, already filming. "This is going to be content gold," she whispered. That Harold's wallet slipped from his arthritic grasp, contents scattering across the oil-stained concrete. Photographs of Margaret fluttered like dying birds. Their wedding day, Michael's graduation, family barbecues when the world made sense. His military medals clinked against the asphalt, Derek's foot connected with Harold's Purple Heart, sending it spinning under a nearby car. Oops, he laughed, his friends joining the chorus. Butterfingers, Grandpa. Please, Harold's voice barely rose above a whisper. Those are all I have left. Should have stayed home then, old man. Derek shoved Harold's walker aside with casual cruelty. The veteran stumbled against his Honda, dignity crumbling like autumn leaves. Other customers averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by gas pump displays and convenience store windows. Nobody wanted to get involved. Harold understood he'd been that person once, before becoming the target. The teenagers circled closer, sharks sensing blood in familiar waters. The T-pump number 4, Steven Seagal moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd spent decades turning violence into art. His Harley-Davidson Street Glide sat like a predatory machine, chrome gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. Black leather jacket, dark jeans, boots that had walked through more fights than most men could imagine. He fed jerky to the mangy stray dog that haunted Murphy's gas station, speaking in low tones that calmed the nervous animal. Easy boy. I know how it feels to be hungry. Steven's dark eyes tracked the developing situation with tactical awareness honed by years of military training and movie sets where real consequences lurked behind choreographed violence. The teenagers moved like amateur predators, all bluster, no technique. Dangerous in their stupidity, the elderly veteran reminded Steven of his own father's generation. Men who'd earned their scars in foreign wars and deserved better than this casual humiliation. Honor wasn't just a movie concept to Steven Seagal. It was a code that demanded action when innocence suffered. That Derek's expensive clothes screamed privilege without responsibility. Custom Camaro, designer watch, dental work that cost more than most people's cars. These weren't desperate kids driven by hunger or desperation. They were bored predators hunting for sport. Steven finished fueling methodically, his movements deliberate. As meditation, the dog pressed against his legs, sensing the tension building in the desert air. Violence had its own smell, sharp, metallic, inevitable when bullies pressed too far. Harold's oxygen tank rolled across the pavement, metallic percussion against concrete. The sound triggered something primal in Steven's warrior instincts. Enough observation. Time for education. He approached the dog one more time, scratching behind ears that had known too little kindness. Stay here, boy. This won't take long. Steven Seagal had spent 50 years learning that some conversations required more than words. These kids were about to discover why legends never really retire. They just wait for the right moment to remind the world what justice looks like. Derek's cruelty escalated like wildfire, finding fresh fuel. He grabbed Harold's steaming coffee cup and poured it deliberately across the veteran's white polo shirt, the liquid spreading like a brown stain across 3 decades of military pride. Whoops, Derek grinned, his crew recording every moment of humiliation. Guess you need better reflexes, soldier boy. Store clerk Mickey Rodriguez watched through bulletproof glass, his 22-year-old face carefully neutral. When Harold's desperate eyes met his, Mickey turned away, suddenly fascinated by lottery ticket displays. The security cameras hadn't worked in months, conveniently broken when situations like this required willful blindness. I fought in Korea, Harold said quietly, coffee dripping from his soaked shirt. Lost friends defending this country. Yeah. Derek stepped closer, invading the old man's space with aggressive confidence. Well, I don't see any heroes here. Just some old fool who can't even hold his coffee. Harold retrieved his Purple Heart from beneath Tyler's shoe, the metal scratched but intact. When he held it up with shaking hands, Derek slapped it away with casual contempt. The decoration skittered across asphalt like discarded trash. Please, Harold's voice cracked. That belonged to my son. He died in Afghanistan. Madison zoomed in on Harold's tears, her phone capturing every moment of breakdown for social media entertainment. This is viral gold, she whispered to Cody, who looked increasingly uncomfortable but said nothing. Derek snatched Harold's car keys from trembling fingers. Maybe I should drive you home, Grandpa. These roads are dangerous for people who can't see straight. Harold's breathing became labored, each inhalation a struggle against panic and humiliation. His oxygen mask dangled uselessly from its cord. 3 years of Tuesday routines, 30 years of military discipline, 78 years of trying to be a decent man, all reduced to entertainment for bored teenagers. The cameras don't work, Derek said, jangling the keys like a taunt. Nobody's watching. Nobody cares about some broken-down old soldier. But Derek was wrong about the cameras, and fatally wrong about nobody watching. The stranger's approach carried the fluid menace of a hunting cat, motorcycle boots clicking against concrete with measured precision. Steven Seagal moved like violence contained in human form, every step deliberate, every gesture carrying weight that spoke to something primal in the human brain. Gentlemen, his voice rumbled with the deep authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I believe you've proven your point. Derek whirled around, sizing up this new player with teenage arrogance intact. The leather-jacketed man looked to be in his 60s, long graying hair tied back, hands loose at his sides. Just another old-timer sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Mind your own business, Gramps, Derek sneered, his crew automatically flanking him like trained wolves. This doesn't concern you. Steven's dark eyes assessed the tactical situation with professional detachment. 4 against 1, but they were untrained amateurs drunk on their own superiority. The veteran behind them was wounded, but not broken good. Innocent bystanders were clearing the area instinctively, sensing predator confronting predator. Your parents teach you to pick on people who can't fight back? Steven asked, his tone conversational despite the electricity crackling through the desert air. My father taught me to take what I want. Derek shot back, stepping chest to chest with Steven in a dominance display that would have intimidated normal men. And right now, I want you to walk away. Tyler and Madison positioned themselves for maximum intimidation, while Cody hung back, his discomfort growing by the second. The pack dynamic was breaking down as real danger entered their playground. Steven's hands remained relaxed, but his weight shifted almost imperceptibly onto the balls of his feet. Aikido taught patience. Let the enemy's aggression become the weapon that destroys them. These kids had no idea they were standing at the edge of a cliff, gravity waiting to teach them about consequences. Son, Steven said quietly, you're about to learn why some conversations end differently than you expect. The first lesson was coming, whether Derek wanted it or not. Derek's fist flew with all the reckless confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. His right hook carried 18 years of privilege and zero technique, telegraphed like a neon sign to anyone with actual combat experience. Steven Seagal caught Derek's wrist mid-swing with effortless precision, his grip closing like a steel trap around bone and sinew. The teenager's momentum became his enemy as Steven executed a textbook Aikido throw, redirecting Derek's own energy to send him sliding across oil-stained asphalt. Tyler rushed forward with pack loyalty, only to find himself guided face first into the Camaro's side panel through a gentle but irresistible wrist control technique. The impact left a Tyler-shaped dent in expensive automotive craftsmanship. Madison stopped filming, finally understanding that her camera was capturing their humiliation rather than their triumph. Cody backed away entirely, his survival instincts overriding peer pressure for the first time in months. Steven moved to Harold's side with surprising tenderness, checking the veteran's oxygen levels and helping him to unsteady feet. His touch was gentle as a nurse's, completely at odds with the destruction he'd just delivered to Derek's crew. Name's Steven, he said simply, steadying Harold against the Honda. Harold's pale blue eyes widened with recognition that went beyond mere celebrity. This was the man from the movies, the one who made bullies disappear and justice look effortless. But more than that, this was a warrior recognizing another warrior, regardless of age or infirmity. Derek struggled upright, his expensive clothes torn and dirty, ego bruised worse than his body. I don't care who you think you are. Steven Seagal, the Aikido master, replied with characteristic calm, as if announcing the weather rather than delivering a death sentence to Derek's confidence. The name hung in the desert air like thunder. After lightning, Harold felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced since Margaret's funeral. Hope. The teenagers exchanged uncertain glances, their entertainment suddenly transformed into something far more dangerous than they'd bargained for. Reality was about to become very educational. Derek's pride refused to accept defeat. Teenage arrogance, overriding every survival instinct that should have been screaming warnings. He signaled Tyler and Cody to flank Steven while Madison fumbled for her phone, calling someone with desperate urgency. "I don't care what movies you made, old man," Derek snarled. "This is the real world." Steven moved like water finding its level, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next as Derek rushed him again. The teenager's wild swing met empty air as Steven stepped aside, using Derek's momentum to guide him into a gentle but firm arm lock that left the boy immobilized against the gas pump. Tyler tried to grab Steven from behind and found himself spun around in a graceful spiral that deposited him sitting on the concrete, dizzy and confused but unharmed. Cody raised his hands and backed away entirely, finally demonstrating the intelligence his friends lacked. "Violence is like a flat tire," Steven observed conversationally, maintaining his hold on Derek with minimal effort. "It gets you nowhere fast." Each technique was pure aikido, using the attacker's energy against them, redirecting rather than meeting force with force. Steven could have broken bones, ruptured organs, ended lives with casual ease. Instead, he chose education over elimination, hoping these kids might learn before learning became impossible. Harold watched in amazement as the legend he'd admired on screen demonstrated why movies couldn't capture the real thing. This wasn't choreographed violence for entertainment. This was controlled destruction in the service of justice, delivered with the precision of a surgeon and the compassion of a teacher. Derek struggled futilely against Steven's grip, his face reddening with exertion and humiliation. The other customers had stopped fleeing, drawn back by the magnetic spectacle of a master craftsman at work. "Let me go," Derek gasped. "Are we done here?" Steven asked patiently. The approaching sirens answered before Derek could respond. Their wailing cry cutting through the desert evening like a promise of complications yet to come. Detective Patricia Valdez stepped from her unmarked Crown Victoria with the practiced authority of someone who owned every crime scene she entered. Mid-40s, sharp suit, calculating eyes that missed nothing and revealed less. Her badge might say Phoenix PD, but her loyalties ran deeper than public service. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the script. Derek immediately shifted into victim mode, his acting skills finally serving a useful purpose. "This maniac attacked us. We were just getting gas when he went crazy." Steven observed Valdez's reaction, or rather, her lack of reaction. No notepad emerged when Derek spoke, no questions about what had triggered the attack. But when her gaze fixed on Harold, every detail got cataloged with predatory interest. Mickey the clerk suddenly remembered seeing Steven throw the first punch, his convenient memory returning just as Valdez's questioning began. Amazing how witnesses developed selective vision when authority figures needed specific narratives. Harold knelt to gather his scattered belongings, photographs of Margaret mixing with desert dust. As he reached under his Honda for his purple heart medal, Steven spotted something that made his blood turn cold. A small plastic bag of white powder that definitely hadn't been there before. "What's this?" Valdez asked with theatrical surprise, her flashlight illuminating the planted evidence. "Sir, I need you to step away from the vehicle." Harold's confusion was genuine and heartbreaking. "I don't understand. That's not mine." But Steven understood perfectly. The bullying had been theater, the real crime was the setup. These kids weren't random punks. They were bait in an elaborate trap designed to catch vulnerable elderly targets. The gas station, the timing, even Valdez's convenient arrival, all orchestrated. Derek's expensive lawyer was already pulling into the parking lot, having been called before the first punch was thrown. This operation had professional backing, which meant Harold was victim number something in a series that wouldn't end with tonight. Steven's tactical mind cataloged the players, the patterns, the implications. This wasn't about teenage bullying anymore. This was war. The fluorescent lights of Phoenix PD's holding area buzzed like angry wasps as Steven observed the carefully orchestrated dance of corruption. Detective Valdez treated Derek and his crew like honored guests, their statements taken with gentle encouragement rather than police interrogation. Harold sat beside Steven on the hard wooden bench, his dignity intact despite the indignity of arrest. The planted evidence had been discovered with theatrical precision, Valdez's flashlight finding the bag exactly where someone had placed it during the confrontation. Derek's lawyer arrived within minutes. Not some overworked public defender, but Marcus Ashford from Brennan, Ashford and Associates, his $1,000 suit and platinum cufflinks screaming corporate defense work. This wasn't a family attorney. This was damage control for serious money. Interesting how fast expensive help arrives, Stephen murmured to Harold. Through the glass partition, Stephen caught fragments of conversation about Derek's father, Richard Brennan, who apparently owned a chain of gas stations and helped elderly drivers after unfortunate incidents. The pieces were assembling into an ugly picture that Stephen's contacts in the stunt community had taught him to recognize patterns. Movie sets attracted con artists like Honey Drew Flies, and this setup had all the hallmarks of professional grifting scaled up to industrial levels. Harold was released on his own recognizance thanks to his spotless military record, but his Honda remained impounded pending investigation. 30 years of clean driving, no arrests, Purple Heart recipient. None of it mattered against planted evidence and corrupt cops. "I can give you a ride," Stephen offered as they walked into the desert night at Harold's apartment complex in Sun City revealed the systematic targeting at work. Senior community, fixed incomes, people who'd outlived most of their advocates. Perfect hunting ground for predators who specialized in legal theft disguised as legitimate business. "This isn't random," Stephen said as Harold unlocked his door. "Someone's been watching you, learning your patterns." Inside the modest apartment, Harold's living room told the story of a life well lived. Military photos, service medals, Margaret's portrait smiling from the mantel. But Stephen's trained eye noticed something else. Mail from insurance companies, legal notices, refinancing offers. Someone had been preparing Harold for harvest. Harold's apartment was a shrine to duty and loss. Korean War unit photos lining the hallway, Margaret's reading glasses still on the side table where she'd left them 3 years ago. Stephen moved through the space with respectful quiet, understanding he was walking through a man's entire world compressed into 800 square feet. "Coffee?" Harold asked, his hands steadier now on familiar ground. The kitchen table held. Tuesday's routine mapped out in painful detail: pill organizer, appointment cards, gas station receipts dating back months. All purchases at Murphy's, same time, same pump. A predator's dream target. "Tell me about your son," Stephen said gently to Harold's weathered fingers traced a photo of a young soldier in desert camouflage. "Michael Patrick Kowalski. Lost him in Afghanistan, 2009. IED on a supply convoy." His voice carried the weight of every father's worst nightmare. "Derek reminds me of him at that age. Same build, same cocky smile." The resemblance explained Harold's initial reluctance to fight back. In Derek's face, he'd seen his dead boy, not the enemy, but the child he'd failed to save. "Military training stays with you," Stephen observed, noting how Harold automatically faced the door, kept his back to walls. "Korea teach you anything about asymmetric warfare?" Harold's pale eyes sharpened with interest. "Reconnaissance mostly. Reading terrain, identifying weak points in enemy positions." He paused. "Why?" Stephen shared his own military background, not the Hollywood version, but the real training that had taught him how predators selected victims and structured operations. "Someone's been studying you, learning your habits. This isn't teenage bullying, it's professional targeting." "But why me?" "Property, pension, benefits. You're a fixed-income senior with valuable assets and no immediate family to protect you." Stephen's analysis was clinical but not unkind. Perfect mark for legal theft disguised as helping. Harold absorbed this with military pragmatism. "What do you recommend, soldier to soldier?" "We learn their operation before they finish yours." Stephen stood, already planning. "But first, you're going to teach me everything you know about surviving behind enemy lines." "I'm 78 years old," Harold protested. "And I'm 61. Age is just another tactical variable." The Veterans Administration hospital bustled with the controlled chaos of government healthcare, but Harold navigated its corridors like familiar territory. Stephen followed, noting how other elderly veterans nodded respectfully at Harold's Purple Heart cap. Recognition between warriors transcending age and infirmity. Frank Castellano waited in the cardiac wing, his 82-year-old frame diminished. by recent stress. Harold, didn't expect to see you here. Frank, this is Steven. He's helping with my situation. Frank's story unfolded like a carbon copy of Harold's experience. Gas station confrontation, planted evidence, legal troubles. Mysteriously resolved by helpful businessman Richard Brennan. Lost my house 6 months later. Brennan's people said it was the only way to pay the legal fees. Eleanor Fitzgerald lived in assisted living now. Her apartment's security chained evidence of constant fear. 75 years old, former librarian. Sharp mind trapped in a body betrayed by manufactured trauma. They came at night, she whispered, showing Steven legal documents transferring her property to Brennan Holdings. After the incident at the gas station, the insurance claims, the court costs, signing seemed like the only option. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the VA's Mental Health Division confirmed Steven's suspicions. Anxiety cases among elderly veterans have tripled in specific zip codes. Always the same pattern, legal troubles followed by financial strain, then property transfer to resolve debts. Each victim's story added pieces to Steven's tactical assessment. The operation was sophisticated. Gas stations provided hunting grounds. Teenagers created incidents. Corrupt cops manufactured evidence. And Brennan's legitimate businesses offered solutions that transferred wealth from victims to perpetrators. How? Many others. Steven asked. 7 confirmed cases, Eleanor replied. 3 more veterans died before their cases resolved. Heart attacks from stress. Harold's jaw tightened. These weren't just property crimes. They were killing his brothers in arms through systematic psychological warfare. Steven's phone buzzed. With a text from Marcus Donnelly, the private investigator Eleanor had mentioned. Can you meet tonight? I've got surveillance footage you need to see. The war was escalating, but now Steven understood the battlefield. Time to start fighting back with more than aikido and good intentions. Marcus Donnelly's investigation firm occupied a strip mall between a bail bondsman and a check-cashing store. Perfect camouflage for someone who made a living exposing other people's secrets. The former Phoenix PD detective looked like he'd aged a decade in the 2 years since. His grandfather's victimization had cost him his badge and his faith in the system. They went after Grandpa Charlie the same way, Marcus explained, spreading files across his desk like a general planning battle. 86 years old, World War II Purple Heart, owned his house free and clear. Perfect target. The surveillance. Photos revealed the network's scope. Richard Brennan's gas stations served as hunting grounds, with specific employees trained to identify vulnerable elderly customers. Tow truck drivers, insurance adjusters, even judges appeared in Marcus's documentation. Judge Patricia Hendricks handles 90% of their cases, Marcus continued. Amazing coincidence how every ruling favors Brennan's interests. Steven studied the organizational chart with military precision. How do they identify targets? Medicare records, VA databases, property assessments. They've got inside sources feeding them information about elderly veterans with assets and limited family support. Marcus pulled out a laptop showing financial transfers. 18-month operation, estimated $7 million in property transfers. Harold examined photos of Derek at various gas stations, always with different groups of teenagers, but following identical scripts. The boy's done this before. Derek's been their front man for 6 months. Different kids each time, but he's consistent. Daddy's little sociopath in training. Marcus's contempt was personal. His grandfather had died of a heart attack before. The case could be resolved. Eleanor leaned forward. How do we stop them? Evidence of active conspiracy, Marcus replied. I've got the pattern, but need proof of coordination. Brennan's hosting Derek's graduation party this weekend. All the key players will be there. Steven's tactical mind was already working. Infiltration opportunity. How many people are we talking about? 100 guests, professional catering. Security team. Brennan's Paradise Valley mansion. Think fortress with a pool. Marcus handed Steven aerial photographs. But here's the problem. They know you now. Valdez made your face, which means Brennan knows you're involved. Steven smiled with predatory anticipation. Then let's give them something to really worry about. Harold straightened in his chair. What do you need from me, soldier? Back at Harold's apartment, Steven transformed the living room into a tactical training center. Throw pillows became practice opponents. The coffee table became an obstacle course, and Harold's walker evolved from mobility aid to defensive weapon. Aikido isn't about strength, Steven demonstrated, showing Harold how to redirect energy rather than meet it head-on. It's about using your opponent's force against them. Perfect for someone who's learned to fight smarter, not harder. Harold's military training surfaced as Steven adapted techniques for limited mobility. The walker became a shield, its legs pressure point tools, its frame a leverage system for joint locks. Harold's arthritic hands might shake, but they remembered how to grip weapons and apply tactical pressure. Korean War taught me about improvised warfare, Harold said, practicing a technique that used his oxygen tank as both shield and weapon. When you can't match their strength, you match their will to survive. Steven's respect for the veteran deepened as Harold demonstrated retained tactical knowledge. The old soldier might need a walker, but his mind remained sharp, his understanding of battlefield psychology intact. Now teach me about reconnaissance. Steven requested that Harold's eyes lit up with professional interest. Rule 1. Blend into the environment. You're not hiding from the enemy. You're becoming invisible by belonging. He pulled out maps of Paradise Valley. Rich neighborhood. Service vehicles everywhere. You want to infiltrate a mansion party? Think caterer, not commando. They planned the infiltration with military precision. Steven would enter as additional catering staff. His Hollywood background made him comfortable with service industry roles. Harold would approach openly as confused elderly neighbor, using his apparent vulnerability as camouflage. The beauty of being 78, Harold smiled, is people assume you're harmless. I can wander anywhere, ask any question, and they'll just think I'm lost. Steven contacted his network of stunt coordinators and military consultants, assembling a team of professionals who owed him favors. Not actors playing soldiers, but actual veterans who'd found second careers in Hollywood. Harold reached out to his VFW coffee group, 5 other elderly veterans who'd been watching their neighborhood deteriorate. Time to see if old soldiers still remember how to soldier, he said. The War Council was forming. Back at Harold's apartment, Steven transformed the living room into a tactical training center. Throw pillows became practice opponents, the coffee table became an obstacle course, and Harold's walker evolved from mobility aid to defensive weapon. Aikido isn't about strength, Steven demonstrated, showing Harold how to redirect energy rather than meet it head-on. It's about using your opponent's force against them. Perfect for someone who's learned to fight smarter, not harder. Harold's military training surfaced as Steven adapted techniques for limited mobility. The walker became a shield, its legs pressure point tools, its frame a leverage system for joint locks. Harold's arthritic hands might shake, but they remembered how to grip weapons and apply tactical pressure. Korean War taught me about improvised warfare, Harold said, practicing a technique that used his oxygen tank as both shield and weapon. When you can't match their strength, you match their will to survive. Steven's respect for the veteran deepened as Harold demonstrated retained tactical knowledge. The old soldier might need a walker, but his mind remained sharp, his understanding of battlefield psychology intact. Now teach me about reconnaissance, Steven requested. Harold's eyes lit up with professional interest. Rule 1. Blend into the environment. You're not hiding from the enemy. You're becoming invisible by belonging. He pulled out maps of Paradise Valley. Rich neighborhood, service vehicles everywhere. You want to infiltrate a mansion party? Think caterer, not commando. They planned the infiltration with military precision. Steven would enter as additional catering staff. His Hollywood background made him comfortable with service industry roles. Harold would approach openly as confused elderly neighbor, using his apparent vulnerability as camouflage. The beauty of being 78, Harold smiled, is people assume you're harmless. I can wander anywhere, ask any question, and they'll just think I'm lost. Steven contacted his network of stunt coordinators and military consultants, assembling a team of professionals who owed him favors. Not actors playing soldiers, but actual veterans who'd found second careers in Hollywood. Harold reached out to his VFW coffee group, 5 other elderly veterans who'd been watching their neighborhood deteriorate. Time to see if old soldiers still remember how to soldier, he said. The War Council was forming. The Brennan Mansion sprawled across 3 acres of Paradise Valley like a monument to successful crime. Spanish tile roofs, manicured gardens, and security cameras disguised as decorative elements proclaimed wealth that exceeded any legitimate gas station owner's means. Steven arrived in the catering van, his server's uniform hiding tactical gear beneath starched white fabric. His years on movie sets had taught him the invisibility of service workers, present but unseen, essential but ignored. The perfect camouflage for reconnaissance. Harold approached the front gate as planned, playing confused elderly neighbor seeking directions to a non-existent address. His walker scraped against ornate iron bars as security guards examined his harmless appearance and waved him through with condescending smiles. The graduation party buzzed with Phoenix's corrupt elite. Richard Brennan worked the crowd like a politician, his silver hair and expensive suit projecting respectability that his eyes contradicted. Detective Valdez mingled off-duty, her designer dress purchased with blood money from destroyed lives. Judge Patricia Hendricks held court beside the pool, her judicial robes replaced by cocktail attire that couldn't disguise the calculating coldness Steven recognized in professional predators. The tow truck drivers from Marcus's files clustered near the bar, celebrating another successful season of hunting. Derek stood apart from the celebration, drinking heavily and avoiding his father's attempts at jovial interaction. The teenagers. Discomfort was obvious to anyone paying attention. Guilt and alcohol making dangerous companions in his conflicted conscience. Through earpieces provided by Marcus, Steven and Harold maintained contact while positioning for surveillance. Steven moved through the kitchen with professional efficiency, his server's role providing access to conversations that assumed invisibility. Harold engaged random guests with elderly charm, his apparent confusion masking sharp tactical observation. The mansion's layout, security positions, escape routes, all cataloged by a mind trained in military reconnaissance. Target-rich environment, Harold whispered into his microphone, watching Brennan guide Judge Hendricks toward his study. Steven acknowledged, following with a serving tray that provided perfect cover. The real evidence was about to reveal itself, if they could survive long enough to use it. That Harold's wire captured every damning word as Brennan explained his operation to Judge Hendricks, his voice carrying the casual arrogance of someone discussing stock portfolios rather than systematic elder abuse. 23 veterans identified so far, Brennan said, pouring aged whiskey into crystal glasses. Phase 2 accelerates the timeline. Home invasions disguised as welfare checks, forcing them into assisted living where asset seizure becomes legal guardianship. Steven, monitoring from the kitchen, felt his blood chill at the scope of planned destruction. This wasn't opportunistic crime. It was industrial-scale predation targeting America's most vulnerable heroes. The gas station incidents are just opening moves, Brennan continued. Real profit comes from long-term care facilities we control. Veterans die faster when they lose hope, and dead clients don't contest property transfers. Judge Hendricks sipped her whiskey with judicial calm. What about the Seagal problem? Handled tonight. Valdez has shooters positioned outside. Make it look like a home invasion gone wrong. Old veteran and his famous friend become casualties of urban crime. Harold's hands trembled as he realized the full extent of their danger. Steven wasn't just investigating crime. He was walking into an execution. Derek overheard his father's plans from the hallway, finally understanding what his pranks had enabled. When he tried to leave, Valdez materialized like a predatory shadow, blocking the door with professional menace. Going somewhere, Derek? She asked, her off-duty appearance masking readiness for violence. Steven spotted armed security moving toward Harold's position through kitchen surveillance cameras. The reconnaissance mission was blown. Time for extraction before extraction became impossible, but Harold wasn't retreating. The old soldier had heard enough to understand the stakes, and his military training was overriding survival instinct. With tactical necessity. Steven, Harold's voice crackled through the earpiece. They're planning to kill us tonight. But I've got evidence of the whole operation on tape. The trap had sprung, but the hunters were about to discover they'd cornered something far more dangerous than an aging veteran and a Hollywood action star. They'd awaken warriors who'd spent lifetimes learning how to win impossible fights. That Marcus's outside surveillance went dark as Brennan's security disabled perimeter cameras with professional efficiency. The mansion's communication systems suffered simultaneous technical difficulties, isolating Steven and Harold from external support. Detective Valdez materialized beside Steven at the serving station, her recognition cutting through his disguise like a blade through silk. "Steven Seagal," she said quietly, "I loved your movies. Shame they have to end this way." Two security men flanked Harold in the study as Brennan revealed the evening's true purpose. "Your friend's intervention actually helped us accelerate the timeline. We'd planned months of legal maneuvering, but direct elimination solves multiple problems simultaneously." Derek's 14-year-old sister Jennifer was brought from her upstairs bedroom, sleep-tousled and confused, her presence transforming the situation from criminal conspiracy to hostage crisis. Brennan's paternal mask finally slipped completely, revealing the sociopath beneath. "Cooperate," and Jennifer returns to her room safely, Brennan said, his voice carrying the flat effect of someone comfortable with using family as leverage. "Resist, and she learns why daddy's business requires permanent solutions." Steven's weapons were confiscated with professional thoroughness. The kitchen knives he'd positioned, the improvised tools hidden in his server's uniform, even the pressure point techniques neutralized by restraints designed for dangerous prisoners. Harold found himself zip-tied in Brennan's study, surrounded by the financial records documenting $7 million in stolen veteran assets. The evidence was overwhelming, but worthless if neither survivor lived to present it. Derek's horror at seeing his sister threatened finally broke through 18 years of manipulation and privilege. His father hadn't just been using him to target strangers. The entire family had been tools in a machine that consumed everything it touched. "Dad, please," Derek pleaded. "Jennifer's just a kid." "Jennifer's insurance," Brennan replied coldly. "Just like you were, until you outlived your usefulness." The mansion had become a prison, but Steven and Harold had spent lifetimes learning that the most dangerous warriors were those with nothing left to lose. The final battle was beginning, whether their captors were ready or not. In the wine cellars. Suffocating darkness, Harold's fingers found the hidden GPS beacon sewn into his veteran's cap, old soldier's paranoia that Margaret had mocked but never made him remove. The device activated with a barely audible chirp, sending coordinates to Marcus Donnelly's surveillance team. Harold's Korean war training surfaced like muscle memory as he used broken wine bottle glass to saw through zip-tie restraints. The cellars. Tools became improvised weapons, corkscrew, bottle opener, heavy vintage magnums that could crack skulls with proper leverage. Meanwhile, Steven employed meditation techniques learned from decades of martial arts discipline. Controlled breathing slowed his heart rate, creating slack in the professional restraints binding his wrists. His years studying with genuine masters had included escape artistry, techniques Hollywood had never captured on film. Outside the mansion, Eleanor Fitzgerald led Harold's VFW coffee group through Paradise Valley's manicured darkness. Frank Castellano, despite his 82 years, guided the civilian assault team with Marine Corps precision honed in Pacific Theater combat 70 years earlier. Marcus's backup team positioned around the property perimeter, their night vision scopes, tracking security guards who'd grown lazy from facing no real opposition. The corrupt network had never encountered coordinated resistance from their elderly victims. Harold emerged from the cellar using service passages he'd mapped during his reconnaissance, his modified walker now equipped with Steven's suggested defensive improvements. The innocent mobility aid had become a tactical tool worthy of military specification. Steven broke free in Brennan's study, using kitchen knowledge gained during his server infiltration to avoid security cameras and patrol routes. His aikido training made him a ghost in the mansion's corridors, present but unseen, moving like shadow through architectural blind spots. The approaching sirens weren't rescue. Valdez's corrupt backup was arriving to clean up loose ends and manufacture evidence of a home invasion gone tragically wrong. Two elderly crime victims, case closed, property transfers proceeding as planned, but Harold's beacon had reached more than Marcus Donnelly. FBI agents alerted through VA channels were establishing containment perimeters, drawn by reports of systematic elder abuse targeting decorated veterans. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Steven moved through the mansion like a predatory spirit, his server's uniform providing perfect camouflage among the catering staff evacuating through service exits. Kitchen utensils became precision weapons in hands trained by 50 years of martial arts discipline. His first priority was Jennifer Brennan, 14 years old, terrified, and positioned as human shield by a father who'd finally revealed his complete moral bankruptcy. Steven's aikido training emphasized protection of innocence above personal safety. Harold ascended from the cellar using maintenance passages map during his reconnaissance phase, his walker clicking against marble floors with measured precision. The mobility aid's modifications proved their worth as he used its frame to trip advancing security guards. They converged in the main hallway as corrupt Phoenix PD officers stormed the front entrance, Valdez's backup team arriving to eliminate witnesses and manufacture evidence. The mansion became a battlefield with civilians caught in crossfire between professional killers and reluctant warriors. Derek, finally understanding his father's true nature, chose moral courage over family loyalty. His knowledge of the mansion's layout proved invaluable as he guided Steven and Harold through passages that bypassed security checkpoints. "Jennifer's in the master suite," Derek whispered, his graduation party clothes torn and bloodied from his father's violence. "Two guards, but they don't expect resistance from family." Steven's assault on the bedroom guards was poetry written in controlled violence. Pressure point strikes rendered them unconscious without permanent damage. Justice, not vengeance, guiding his techniques even under extreme stress. Harold provided overwatch from the hallway, his military experience allowing him to coordinate movement and call out threats that Steven's forward position couldn't detect. The old veteran's tactical mind remained sharp despite physical limitations. Jennifer's rescue required delicate precision. She was traumatized, confused, and surrounded by adults whose motivations she couldn't understand. Steven's unexpected gentleness calmed her panic as they prepared for extraction through routes Derek had identified. The corrupt officers were closing in, but they faced opponents who'd spent lifetimes learning that impossible odds simply required better tactics and stronger will. The mansion's luxury appointments were about to become weapons in the hands of men who'd mastered the art of survival. Marcus's team created diversions around the property perimeter, while legitimate FBI agents established containment beyond Brennan's corrupted local influence. The mansion became an island of violence surrounded by federal authority that couldn't be bought or intimidated. Inside, Brennan held his position in the study with professional security, his desperation making him more dangerous than careful planning ever could. Richard Brennan had spent years building his criminal empire, and he wouldn't surrender it to an aging veteran and a Hollywood has-been. Steven faced the tactical nightmare of protecting three non-combatants, Harold, Derek, and Jennifer, while fighting professionally trained killers in confined spaces. The mansion's luxury became battlefield advantage as he used gas fireplace pressure, electrical systems, and water from damaged pipes that Harold's overwatch position provided crucial intelligence, his Korean War experience translating perfectly to urban warfare conditions. "Two shooters, East Corridor," he called softly. "Third man flanking through the kitchen." Derek's insider knowledge proved invaluable as he guided their movement through passages that security teams didn't know existed. The privileged teenager was discovering courage he'd never needed before his father's mask finally slipped. "There's a panic room behind the library," Derek whispered. "Independent communication, reinforced walls. If we can reach it." Brennan's voice boomed through the mansion's intercom system, amplified by speakers in every room. "Derek, bring me the old man and his friend, or Jennifer learns why family businesses sometimes require permanent solutions." The ultimate threat, a father willing to murder his own daughter to maintain criminal control. Steven had faced movie villains with more conscience than Richard Brennan was displaying under pressure. Jennifer's terror was palpable as gunshots echoed through marble corridors. She pressed against Derek, finally seeing her father as the monster Steven and Harold had recognized from their first encounter with his operation. "We need to end this," Steven said quietly, his dark eyes calculating distances and angles with tactical precision. "Harold, can you get Derek and Jennifer to safety?" "What are you planning?" Harold asked, though his military experience already recognized the look in Steven's eyes. "Teaching a lesson about the cost of threatening innocence." Derek stood frozen between family blood and moral conscience, his father's ultimatum echoing through the mansion like a death sentence waiting for his signature. 18 years of manipulation warred against 30 minutes of truth in a battle for his soul. Steven used psychology instead of force, understanding that Derek's choice would determine whether they faced one enemy or two. Your father's not giving you a choice between right and wrong, Steven said quietly. He's asking you to choose between who you've been and who you could become. Harold shared the story of his son Michael's death in Afghanistan, how Private Kowalski had thrown himself on an IED to protect Afghan civilians, choosing others over himself in the moment that defined his character. The parallel to Derek's current situation was deliberate and powerful. Michael was your age when he made his choice, Harold said, his voice carrying the weight of paternal pride mixed with devastating loss. He chose to be someone worthy of the uniform he wore. Derek saw himself reflected in that story, privileged teenager facing the moment that would define his entire life. His father had spent years teaching him that strength meant taking what you wanted from weaker people. But Steven and Harold represented a different kind of strength entirely. When Derek refused Brennan's order, Detective Valdez moved to execute. Harold personally, her service weapon drawn with professional efficiency. The corrupt cop had finally abandoned all pretense of law enforcement legitimacy. Steven's intervention was lightning made flesh, a wrist twist that sent Valdez's gun spinning across marble floors, followed by a pressure point strike that left her conscious but completely paralyzed. His aikido mastery turning deadly force into controlled education. Derek stepped between his father and sister, finally becoming the man his actions should have made him years earlier. No more, Dad. It's over. Brennan's rage overrode his tactical thinking as he realized his son's defection had cost him his most valuable asset. The criminal mastermind was about to make the mistake that would destroy everything he'd built. The final confrontation was beginning, and Derek Brennan had chosen his side. Brennan's pistol erupted with deafening violence as he shot his own son in the shoulder for defying criminal orders. Derek's scream shattered the mansion's tense silence as blood spread across his graduation party clothes like spilled wine on white silk. Steven exploded into motion with controlled fury that transformed Aikido philosophy into devastating reality. His assault on Brennan became personal, not revenge, but justice delivered with surgical precision by someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art of righteous violence. Brennan proved more dangerous than expected, his own military background surfacing as he countered Steven's initial attacks with professional competence. The study became a battlefield as two trained killers fought with improvised weapons among scattered financial records documenting millions in stolen veteran assets. Harold protected Jennifer while providing tactical support, using his walker to trip advancing security guards and his oxygen tank as an improvised projectile. The old soldier's Korean War training merged seamlessly with protective instinct as bullets shattered priceless artwork around them. Steven's decades of disciplined practice overcame Brennan's raw aggression as the fight destroyed the study's luxury appointments. Crystal decanters became projectiles, antique furniture transformed into clubs, and Persian rugs absorbed blood from both combatants. You destroyed families, Steven snarled, his Aikido techniques mixing with environmental weapons as he systematically dismantled Brennan's defenses, killed veterans through stress and despair. Brennan's response was a knife thrust aimed at Steven's heart, the blade gleaming with lethal intent. But Steven's training included weapons defense. He redirected the attack with fluid grace, using Brennan's momentum to drive the criminal mastermind face-first into his own desk. The final technique was pure Steven Seagal, a precise nerve strike to the base of Brennan's neck that left the criminal conscious but completely paralyzed from the shoulders down. Not death, but justice delivered with mathematical precision. That Brennan's eyes widened with terror as he realized his body no longer obeyed his commands. Steven's signature technique had turned the predator into helpless prey, stripped of power, but forced to witness the consequences of his choices. Now you know how your victims felt, Steven said quietly, helpless and afraid. With Brennan neutralized, Steven moved through the remaining security forces like death given human form. Each takedown was calculated with Aikido precision. Pressure points to disable without killing, joint locks to subdue without permanent damage. Harold coordinated with FBI entry teams via his hidden GPS beacon, providing interior intelligence that allowed federal agents to distinguish between innocent staff and criminal conspirators. His military communications training proved invaluable in the tactical chaos. Derek, despite his shoulder wound, helped evacuate terrified party guests who discovered their host was a criminal mastermind. Jennifer tended to her brother's injury with surprising medical competence learned from too many years watching their father's violence. Marcus's evidence files, combined with Harold's recorded conversations and Steven's witness testimony, provided federal agents with prosecutorial ammunition that would demolish the entire criminal network. The mansion's hidden office revealed financial records proving systematic elder abuse on an industrial scale. Steven's assault on the final security team was a masterclass in controlled violence. One guard found himself gently guided into unconsciousness through a sleeper hold. Another discovered that expensive tactical gear meant nothing against properly applied pressure point techniques. The corrupt Phoenix PD officers attempting to flee found their escape routes blocked by Eleanor Fitzgerald and the VFW veterans who'd surrounded the property. 80-year-old former Marines proved surprisingly effective at citizens' arrests when properly motivated by righteous anger. Detective Valdez made a desperate attempt to reach her patrol car, only to discover Frank Castellano waiting beside it. With a tire iron and 6 decades of stored resentment for corrupt authority figures. "Going somewhere, Detective?" Frank asked politely, his Marine Corps training still evident despite his advanced years. The mansion's wine cellar became an impromptu holding facility as federal agents processed the criminals who'd spent months targeting America's most vulnerable veterans. Justice was finally being served with federal rather than local seasoning. Harold stood in the destroyed study, surrounded by evidence of crimes against his fellow veterans, feeling something he hadn't experienced since Margaret's death: vindication, mixed with hope for the future. The war was over, but the victory belonged to everyone who'd refused to surrender. 6 weeks later, the Maricopa County Courthouse buzzed with media attention as justice finally arrived for Richard Brennan's criminal empire. Steven avoided the cameras, his satisfaction coming from watching Harold's dignity restored rather than personal recognition. Judge Patricia Hendricks faced her own federal charges in a different courtroom, her judicial robes replaced by orange jumpsuit as she discovered what justice looked like from the defendant's table. The corrupt legal system she'd helped create was dismantling itself with federal precision. Detective Valdez pleaded guilty to conspiracy and corruption charges, her testimony against Brennan's operation earning 20 years instead of life without parole. The Phoenix PD launched internal investigations that would cleanse their ranks of similar corruption. Derek testified against his father's operation with quiet courage. His shoulder wound healed, but his psychological scars still visible. The teenager's decision to protect his sister had earned community service instead of prison time. Redemption through service rather than punishment. That Harold's charges were dismissed with prejudice. His Purple Heart returned along with formal apologies from the Phoenix Police Department. The VA provided counseling for all identified victims, while Marcus Donnelly's investigation firm received federal contracts to investigate similar elder abuse operations nationwide. Richard Brennan received 25 years for organized crime, elder abuse, and conspiracy, effectively a life sentence for someone who'd spent years destroying other lives for profit. His gas station empire was seized under federal asset forfeiture laws, the proceeds funding veteran assistance programs. The tow truck drivers, insurance adjusters, and other conspirators faced their own federal sentences as the entire network collapsed under prosecutorial weight. $7 million in stolen veteran assets were recovered and returned to surviving victims or their families. Eleanor Fitzgerald reclaimed her house and dignity, while Frank Castellano discovered that fighting corruption was more satisfying than complaining about it. The VFW Coffee Group had evolved into a veteran advocacy organization with federal backing and serious political influence. Derek visited Harold in the hospital where the old veteran was recovering from exhaustion and stress, their former enemy. Relationship transformed into unexpected mentorship opportunity. "Second chances don't come often," Harold told Derek quietly. "Make this one count." 3 months later, Harold Kowalski commanded the community center's multipurpose room with the natural authority of someone who'd finally rediscovered his purpose in life. His walker was no longer a symbol of weakness, but a badge of honor, demonstrating how perceived limitations could become tactical advantages. Self-defense isn't about fighting, Harold explained to his elderly students, demonstrating the pressure point technique Steven had taught him. It's about projecting confidence that makes predators look for easier targets. Derek Brennan volunteered at the VA hospital, his community service transforming into genuine calling as he helped elderly veterans navigate bureaucracy and technology. The privileged teenager had discovered that real strength came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. Steven arrived unannounced for the class, watching from the back as Harold empowered fellow seniors with both physical techniques and mental resilience. The aikido master's satisfaction was complete. He'd taught Harold to fish rather than simply providing temporary rescue. After class, the three men shared coffee in the community center's kitchen, their unlikely friendship forged in violence, but sustained by mutual respect. Harold poured from the same pot he'd used for 30 years, his hands steady with renewed purpose. "Some regrets fill you up with poison," Harold said, stirring sugar into his cup with thoughtful precision. "Others empty you out with wisdom. The trick is choosing which ones to carry forward." Derek had learned to carry the right regrets. Remorse that motivated service rather than self-pity that enabled continued selfishness. His work with elderly veterans was teaching him about honor that his father's wealth had never provided. Steven prepared to leave on his Harley-Davidson, but promised to check in during his travels through Phoenix. The warrior's code didn't end with single victories. It required lifelong vigilance against injustice wherever it appeared. Harold returned to Murphy's gas station for the first time since the incident, pumping gas at pump number 3 with quiet confidence. The teenage employees treated him with automatic respect, not from fear, but from the dignity he now projected like armor. His Tuesday routine continued, but transformed by purpose and community that Margaret would have recognized and approved. Some legends never retire. They just find new ways to serve. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.